Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm back on my usual type of video, and kicking off the month, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite series, Sly Cooper. Specifically the game that started it all, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. The first game in the series dropped onto the PS2 almost 20 years back in 2002, developed by Sucker Punch Productions. The main story of the game is that Sly Cooper is on a mission to retrieve an ancient book of thieving techniques known as the Thievius Raccoonus, stolen from his family by a gang of criminals known as the Fiendish Five. As explained after the opening tutorial level, Sly comes from a family of master thieves, and on the day he was to inherit the titular book, the Fiendish Five attacked his home and killed his father. Splitting up the book, the criminals go their separate ways, leaving poor Sly an orphan. Growing up in an orphanage, he would soon meet his two closest friends, Bentley, a turtle and the tech genius of their group, and Murray, a cowardly hippo who serves as the crew's driver. Swearing to take down the Fiendish Five and track down the pieces of the book, they travel across the world to take them down and avenge Sly's father. Along their travels, they're followed by Inspector Carmelita Fox, an Interpol officer dedicated to taking down Sly and the Cooper gang. The game is divided into 5 different worlds, or episodes as the games call it, each one centering around a different part of the world and a different member of the Fiendish Five. One thing I really like is how each episode starts with an animated comic book-like segment that gives us some backstory on the boss of the level. Gameplay consists of entering a world, infiltrating the headquarters of one of the members, and unlocking a small hub world. Here you can enter different levels, each one holding a treasure key that will let you advance further into the hub world and eventually face off against the boss of the level. The game is mainly a platformer, with some light stealth elements peppered in, with Sly maneuvering through an area, taking out enemies with his cane or just sneaking past them. Sly is pretty fragile. Similar to Crash Bandicoot, he doesn't have a health bar and instead dies in one hit, using up a life. This can be mitigated a bit by finding horseshoes in a level that work like Aku Aku Mass, protecting Sly from an extra hit. Despite killing him in one shot, Sly's enemies are equally as fragile. The tricky part is avoiding their attacks, as they'll either charge you, fire projectiles, or swing at you with huge weapons. The levels themselves are pretty linear in design, and small in scale, so it's impossible to get lost trying to find a treasure key. Peppered around the levels you'll find coins and clue bottles. Coins working like they do in just about every other platformer, that when you collect 100 of them, you'll gain an extra horseshoe or extra life if you already have 2 horseshoes. Clue bottles, when gathered up, will give a code that Bentley will use to decipher and unlock a vault somewhere in the level. Vaults will usually hold a page of the Thievius Raccoonus, unlocking a new move for Sly. The moves, at least in this game, vary a lot in quality, leaning more towards lackluster if I'm being honest. Things like the dive attack or being immune to water are decent, but things like slowing down the game or rolling around feel super lackluster, and not worth the time to unlock them. To keep the game from being too repetitive, you'll sometimes get into vehicle levels or shooting segments. While it's nice to change things up, they don't feel fully fleshed out, and in the case of the racing segments, control pretty poorly. Once all the keys are collected in a level, you'll be able to move on to fight the boss. The bosses are a bit different in this game as opposed to the usual hit them 3 times and run like in Mario, for example. Most work as puzzles, having to use the environment in order to hurt them, or getting into a full-on rhythm game in order to reach and hurt them. After you beat the boss, you'll get a portion of the Thievius Raccoonus, unlocking a move that will let you proceed into the next episode. After the tutorial in Paris, Sly and the gang will make their move on the Fiendish Five. Small island south of Wales, in search of the first member of the Fiendish Five, Sir Raleigh the Frog. As the opening intro explains, Raleigh was born rich and privileged, but soon grew bored of his pampered life. He decided to try piracy on a whim, and learned he had a knack for it, building all types of machines to help in his pursuits, and slowly growing a criminal empire of looting ships. This would lead him to get recruited into the Fiendish Five as their chief machinist. I'm not 100% sure, but I wonder if this story is inspired by Stede Bonnet, a real-life pirate with a similar backstory of growing up privileged before turning to piracy. His episode has you arrive on a stormy island, Raleigh himself flying around on a blimp that he built, letting him create storms to sink ships and plunder their loot. His henchmen are all sea creatures, made up of walruses and squids. The individual levels will have you explore the interior of his fortress, sneaking through pipes and engine rooms, underwater caves, his personal library, and even a ship graveyard. You'll get one vehicle level here, with Sly hopping into a sub and shooting treasure chests in order to earn a key. It plays like a twin stick shooter, one stick moving the sub and the other firing missiles. The objective is simple enough: don't let the crab steal any treasure, and collect 40 treasure chests to win. After all the treasure keys are collected, Sly will fire himself out of a cannon to board the blimp and come face to face with Sir Raleigh. He'll eat a fly and swell up in size, the fight primarily being him trying to crush Sly before shrinking down for a brief moment where he's vulnerable. It's nothing special. The fight will drop platforms as you fight him, but it's still pretty easy to evade him and stay dry. Once he's beaten, he'll point you in the direction of the next member of the Fiendish Five, and Sly will retrieve his piece of the Thievius Raccoonus, letting him perform the spire jump. Once wrapped up here, Carmelita will arrest Raleigh, and the Cooper gang is off to Utah to find Mugshot. Mugshot is the muscle of the Fiendish Five. Growing up as a scrawny runt who was inspired by gangster movies to become a gangster himself, he started hitting the weights and skipping leg day apparently, to build up a fearsome reputation and take over Mesa City in Utah. The level begins with the gang arriving on the outskirts of town, the once bustling city now a decrepit ghost town. The intro has you make use of the spire jump to sneak into the main part of the city, Mugshot's casino, doing your best to avoid his canine henchmen. In the main hub, you'll go through the usual levels, but also get a turret section and racing level. The turret level will have you protect Murray as he makes his way through the area to steal the key, and the racing level has you control Murray in the van. Like I griped about earlier, I'm not a fan of his racing level because of how the van controls. It's not hard, but it'll take a few tries to get it right. You'll also get his chase segment with Carmelita shooting at Sly from afar, knocking out whatever platform he's standing on, trying to take him out. Once the keys are collected, Sly busts into the casino and confronts Mugshot. Mugshot's fight is much different and a lot tougher than Sir Raleigh's. Because of how swole he is, Sly's cane can't damage him at all. Instead, you'll have to run away from him, dodging his machine guns and hitting these conveniently placed mirrors around the room. Once all the mirrors are hit, they'll shine on the jewels in the room, working like a sort of magnifying glass to burn up Mugshot's guns and hurt him. The fight's tougher than I'm describing it, as it can be hard to dodge his gunshots, and the arena you fight him in is getting smaller and smaller. And it may be one of the few times you actually get a game over in this game. After Mugshot's beaten, he'll point you in the direction of the next member of the Fiendish Five down in Haiti. Like last time, Carmelita will swoop in looking for Sly, but arrest Mugshot instead. Next stop, Miss Ruby. Miss Ruby is a voodoo priestess, having grown up with only the undead as her friends, due to her weirdness and mysticism. Because of that, she ends up turning to a life of crime as revenge for those who shunned her. It's not really explained what her job in the Fiendish Five is. Sly says she's chief mystic, but what does that mean? The animated intro has her looking in a crystal ball staring at a bank, so maybe she can see the future or something? I don't know. Moving on. Despite Sly saying they were heading to the jungles of Haiti, the level honestly looks more like a Louisiana swamp. Maybe that was the original idea, but the devs felt it was too cliched, or they didn't want to set two levels in the same country? I don't know. Sneaking through the area, Sly will put the newest move he learned from the Thievius Raccoonus, the rail slide, to pretty good use. Once inside the main hub, you'll have to figure out a way up to Miss Ruby's crocodile skull lair thing, which as you guess means getting those keys. New level types this time around include outrunning a giant snake, beating up some chickens for gumbo, running over some piranha, and another vehicle level. This one's pretty simple though. You ride a bike through the level as Sly, shooting obstacles and enemies on your way to the key. Nothing too crazy, but I like it that it controls easily and is fairly straightforward. Once all the keys are collected, Sly will jump on the lid of a giant cauldron and get sent flying towards Miss Ruby's lair. Instead of fighting her directly or dropping something on her, the entire fight is a rhythm game instead. It's not a dance-off though, as hilariously awesome as that would be. Miss Ruby will fire spells at Sly, needing him to dodge her by pressing the corresponding button, slowly getting closer to her until finally he can hit her. This part is tricky, at least on the PS3 version, as the rhythm you have to press the buttons is out of sync with the music, throwing you off if you're going off the music cues. Also, like the other bosses, if you die at any part, you'll have to restart the entire fight, really stretching it out. Once she's taken care of, you'll get another piece of the book, this time unlocking the ability to turn invisible when standing perfectly still. Carmelita will arrest Miss Ruby, and the Cooper gang are off to China to take care of the Panda King. Panda King's backstory is that he grew up poor in a mountain village. As a kid, he'd look up at the sky in awe of the fireworks the nobles set off. Learning how to make his own fireworks, when he got older, he tried selling them to those same nobles. They refused to do business with him because of his poor upbringing. Feeling shunned, he of course turned to crime. Blowing up the nobles and taking over the area, he became the demolitions expert for the Fiendish Five. This episode is my favorite location, a snowy mountain village in China. Out of all the episodes, it's probably the one that needs you to use stealth the most, often having to turn invisible to go through certain traps or lasers. There are quite a few lantern guards bunched near each other too, so you can't just brute force them like normal. This episode features another turret level, another bike level, another racing level, and another Carmelita chase level. Despite liking this episode, it's a bummer there wasn't any new level type introduced here. Once the keys are gathered up, you can face off with the Panda King, and unlike the other bosses, he's just a normal boss fight, which after Mugshot and especially Miss Ruby, I'm all for it. The fight starts at the bottom of the arena, the Panda King throwing fireballs at Sly. You have to make your way up to him without getting hit, using the vases and statues for cover. Once you make it to him, you just whack him with Sly's cane, dodging his kung fu moves, and once you do enough damage, he'll send you back to the bottom of the arena. Make it back up to him, dodge his moves, and he's finished. With him taken care of, Carmelita does her thing yet again, and the crew heads for Russia to take down the leader of the Fiendish Five, Clockwork. Clockwork is a near-immortal cybernetic owl who's been fighting the Cooper clan for centuries. Jealous of the Cooper clan outshining him as thieves, he kept himself alive longer by slowly replacing his organic parts with robotic ones. After killing Sly's dad and splitting up the Thievius Raccoonus, he intentionally left Sly alive, hoping to prove the Cooper clan was nothing without the book. Unlike the others, his episode lacks the hub world with split up levels, instead having you go from level to level immediately. First, you have to infiltrate his fortress, using the page from the Thievius Raccoonus you received from Panda King to add a turret to the van. The van will slowly move through the level, with Sly having to shoot robotic birds and falling rocks to protect the van. In the next part, you have to collect fallen computers in order to hack your way into Clockwork's fortress. Not too hard, just having to collect 60 before the lava slugs in the cave do. Once you make it inside his lair, you'll spot Carmelita, who's been captured by Clockwork. Despite Bentley's warning to Sly that it's most likely a trap, he can't leave the inspector behind. There's a ton of security around Carmelita, so in order to get to her, you have to make your way up to a barrel and use it to sneak through the searchlights, lasers, and turrets. Easier said than done, as once you get in the barrel, it's way too easy to set off an alarm as you try to get to her. Once you do, as Bentley warned, Clockwork traps Sly and sets off a gas trap. Controlling Bentley for the first time, you'll have to hack the system to save Sly. This takes the form of another twin-stick shooter, Bentley in cyberspace having to shoot through Clockwork's security and collecting 13 codes. Even though you have a health bar this time, this part is really annoying, as the broken green pieces hurt Bentley and these security owls can instantly one-shot you. Once that's done, you'll move on to the next section, getting to control Carmelita. Sort of. It's just the turret section from earlier in the game, just with Carmelita using her shock pistol to cover Sly. Once that's done, we're on the final level before the boss fight. It's one long platforming level, the entire area sinking into lava as you rush to make it to Carmelita's jetpack. Not counting the boss fights, I'd say this is the hardest level of the game, as there's little room for error as you're running, jumping, and climbing. Made worse is there's certain parts where you have to wait for a trap to shut off to get past it. Once this nightmare is done, you can finally go after Clockwork. The fight comes in 3 stages, the first 2 stages making use of the newly acquired jetpack. You'll be flying around the area with Clockwork chasing after you, shooting energy bullets. Carmelita will shoot one of his limbs, charging it up and letting Sly's missiles hit him. Once his health drops, he'll fall in the lava and rise back up with some new weapons, firing out these giant electric rings that damage the whole screen. The only way to avoid them is to fly into the middle of the rings, which can be tough due to how they expand. Like before, you'll only be able to hurt Clockwork once a limb is charged by Carmelita. Once he goes down a second time, he'll land on a piece of his fortress, damaged badly but starting to repair himself. The third phase is a platform challenge, testing all your jumping and sneaking skills in order to get the Clockwork. Once you do, bash his head to pieces, and you've beaten the game. Sly grabs the last piece of the Thievius Raccoonus, reminiscing on how he and his friends beat the Fiendish Five together. Yay, power of friendship! Sly's confronted by Carmelita soon after, giving him a 10-second head start to run off. Sly uses up 9 seconds after standing there before using the 10th second to swoop in and steal a kiss from Carmelita. While she looks like she doesn't mind, she immediately gets pissed when she realizes he handcuffed her to a rail and ran off. The Cooper gang drives off to their next adventure, and the game gives us one last look at Clockwork's head slowly activating, hinting at a sequel. The first game in the Sly Cooper series is a rough game to return to. It's by no means bad, but the sequels did things so much better and really created an identity for the series. The first game feels more like your generic platformer from the N64 and PS1 days. It has an animal mascot, a bunch of collectibles, one-hit deaths, and the usual lives and level system. Other than Sly and maybe Carmelita, the characters don't really feel all that fleshed out, especially the bosses, who get a quick backstory in the episode intro, but don't actually show up until the end of an episode. The level design is very linear, and the stealth elements aren't as integral to the game compared to the sequels. The power-ups are another letdown, as it feels like there's too many vaults, with most power-ups being pretty useless or feeling like something that should be standard, like the spire jump or the rail ride. The last thing I want to critique is the voice acting. It's not outright bad like Resident Evil, but something feels off with the delivery. Specifically Sly, who sounds fine in the narration for episodes, but sounds disconnected in calm conversations or cutscenes. I think he's trying to play the uncaring cool guy a bit too hard, coming off as emotionless and robotic at times instead. Criticisms aside, it set a solid foundation for the games that would follow. The world and characters are colorful, the story doesn't take itself too seriously, the animated intros and overall comic book feel helped it stand out compared to other platformers. The characters aren't all that fleshed out, but I like their individual designs. And while the levels are pretty basic and a bit repetitive, the game doesn't feel overly padded. The sequel would ditch the one-hit deaths for a health system, the hub world would be hugely expanded, ditching levels for missions that would build up to a heist at an end of an episode. Instead of collecting 100 coins for an extra life or a horseshoe, they would be used to purchase new moves and could be stolen from enemies instead. Also, playing as other characters would be just that, being able to use them throughout the hub level and each one having their own unique moveset. Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus is a fun platformer. While it can feel a bit generic and uninspired at times, the thing it does do right was enough to help it stand out and help the series grow. The characters are fun, and the animated intros was a great way to get the audience engaged with the game. And that's the video. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and if you want to see more of my content, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. I'm Fuzzy Slippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.